In pro wrestling, we know everything is scripted. It is entertainment that is imagined to make us have a good time. But the shows are often live, which can lead to completely unexpected and memorable scenes. It's a delight to meet you on the wrestling paradise to present you moments that viewers weren't supposed to see in the WWE. Are you ready to be shocked to learn how Stone Cold Steve Austin has already been eliminated from the Royal Rumble by accident? Do you want to know more about the harder-than-expected guitar shot that ruined Jake Roberts' life? Do you want to find out if any wrestlers have ever made a fool of themselves on the air? And are you curious to learn how Brock Lesnar made John Cena bleed while it wasn't in the script? You have come to the right place, because in our video we will discover multiple scenes together that were not planned, and they will amaze you. You are on the wrestling paradise, the moments that weren't supposed to happen in the WWE. Let's go. Let's start with a type of unplanned moments that didn't happen often in the WWE, and we will quickly understand why. When a wrestler allows himself to do something to Vince McMahon that he doesn't like at all. If you didn't know it yet, McMahon was the Federation's big boss for many years. He was particularly famous for this catchphrase. The incident we're going to talk about happened on Monday Night Raw, one of the company's weekly shows, in February 2016. It was not a show like the others. Daniel Bryan announced that he was forced to retire because of health problems. You have to know he was one of the most popular wrestlers, so it was very emotional for everyone. The company officials as well as the other wrestlers came on the stage to see it. A moment that was not supposed to happen will take place at the end of this scene. While Daniel Bryan had left backstage, Vince McMahon was about to leave too. Except that the wrestler Titus O'Neil has the bad idea of pulling him by the arm in front of the cameras. The boss is immediately upset and pushes him. The explanation behind this moment is quite amazing. In fact, the reason Titus allowed himself to do this to his boss is because he wanted to let Stephanie McMahon go first. In his eyes, Vince had to let this lady first, in this case his daughter. It was pure gallantry. We imagine that he bitterly regretted it, because he will be suspended for 2 months right after that, and he will be fined $5,000. He learned the hard way that you don't touch Vince McMahon, let alone in front of cameras. In wrestling, it's complicated when things don't go as planned. By definition, it is a discipline where everything is scripted, where the winners are determined in advance. So you can imagine it. The worst unplanned thing that can happen is that a major match doesn't have the outcome that the WWE officials had decided. We had a case like that at the TLC show at the end of 2009. On that day, John Cena defended his title against the Irishman who was making a thunderous debut in the main roster, Sheamus.
You want an example of how confident Sheamus is?
The stipulation of their match was original. It was a tables match, so you had to put your opponent through a table to win the match. The ending was going to be quite unexpected. Mr. You Can't See Me gets a table and places it to try to throw Sheamus on it. But in a strange scene to say the least, he will end up breaking the table first and offering the victory to his colleague. This finish will make a lot of people talk. We will hear some people say they should have both fallen on it at the same time, but that they missed the maneuver. Anyway, they will play the Irishman's music, who was on the rise, and his reign will last until the end of February. If it was really an unplanned event, we can imagine that the WWE would have quickly rectified the situation by setting up a rematch the next day, as it has already happened in the past. Anyway, it was such a surprise to see John Cena lose to a Sheamus who had just started that we can understand that it seems unplanned. The ring is a place where wrestlers must be prepared for all imaginable unplanned events. But there is one element we don't always think about when we consider the problems that can happen. The ropes. They can break in the middle of a match after a really violent impact, but not only that. We are at WrestleMania 21 in 2005. On that day, a match was set up for the first time ever, the Money in the Bank ladder match. Several wrestlers were competing to get a contract that would offer them an opportunity for the title of their choice at any time, for a year. It was a spectacular battle, as this type of match will always be in the future. At some point, Kane will do his famous chokeslam on the young Shelton Benjamin, but there will be a little problem. Instead of falling towards the outside of the ring, his foot will get stuck between the ropes. It was a rather surreal scene. Fortunately, Shelton will not get injured, and it will not change the overall scenario of this very entertaining confrontation. Nevertheless, it remains true that problems can happen at any place in the ring, even those that we think about the least. Sometimes some wrestlers are not lucky. You may not remember it, but Baron Corbin had a King character a few years ago. He knew how to make himself despicable, and was one of the main villains on SmackDown. We remember, for example, a scene where he poured dog food on Roman Reigns. However, he already had to face a rather ridiculous unplanned event. It is October 2019 and he was sitting on his throne near the commentator's table. All of a sudden, his throne will collapse for no apparent reason. Maybe someone had sabotaged it, unless it was some low-quality wood. The fact is, he will make everyone laugh in spite of himself, especially Randy Orton. The Viper was right next to him and couldn't help but laugh. You must realize how this kind of moment can damage a character. He is supposed to be credible with a very royal identity, but because of a randomness that doesn't seem to be in his hands at all, he looks like a clown. On the other hand, we can congratulate Baron Corbin for not breaking character and for not panicking. It's April 9th, 2012 on Raw. At that time, John Cena recently lost to The Rock at WrestleMania, and he now had to face a huge newcomer, the former WWE and UFC champion Brock Lesnar.
I'd like to thank Mr. John Laurinaitis for having the wisdom to bring legitimacy back to the WWE.
From the start, their rivalry was very physical. Nevertheless, it went further than expected, although you will see it was finally a good thing. On that day, they were in the same ring, and we can say that Cena and Lesnar let their bodies do the talking. Very quickly, John slaps him, so Brock immediately jumps on him to destroy him. In this intense brawl, the Beast Incarnate hits him in the mouth. While many wrestlers try to separate them, we see the C-Nation leader with a bloody mouth. We must admit it was a hell of a visual, especially since blood was becoming more and more rare in a WWE, which was more concerned about its image. Even if we weren't supposed to see the company's face bleed, it immediately became iconic. Many consider this scene to be one of the best brawls ever. It is undeniable that this unplanned event gave it a realistic and legitimate side that was very welcome. It's September 25th, 2006 when the WWE had to deal with an unprecedented unplanned event that was completely crazy. Raw, which is live, is just starting when there is a power outage that puts the entire arena into darkness. We couldn't see anything anymore. The announcer Lillian Garcia's microphone didn't work either. We must be sufficiently aware of the seriousness of the situation. We are live, millions of people are watching, ratings are important for the company, advertisers have paid for ads. If the problem isn't fixed, the rating will be very bad, the advertisers will be angry, the company will lose money and look bad. They ended up finding solutions with a wired microphone that worked, special lighting. In the end, the problem will be solved after a few minutes. For this number 4, we are facing a scenario with heavy consequences. As you know, in sports entertainment, there isn't only wrestling in the ring. They also use objects to hit each other. Even if some of them are gimmicked, it doesn't mean that big unplanned events don't happen. Just talk to Jake Roberts about it. In the early 90s, he was an excellent villain who had a terrifying thing about him. He always had a snake with him that he sent on his opponents. One day, in February 1987, there was a scene between Roberts and the Honky Tonk Man, a character clearly inspired by Elvis Presley. At a moment when his back was turned, Jake will get a huge guitar shot on his head. There was a big problem. The guitar was much harder than it should have been. Usually the guitars in wrestling are never real guitars and break very easily at the slightest touch. But in this case, the guitar had almost nothing on the first shot, which smashed Roberts. If we pay attention, we even see that the Honky Tonk Man seems surprised right after it and looks at the guitar, because he surely expected it to break completely. He'll give a few more shots right after that. This mistake will have very serious repercussions. Jake will have big neck problems, which will lead him to painkillers, to which he will become addicted, and it will end up destroying his life. Fortunately for him, he will get better thanks to his friend Diamond Dallas Page, a wrestler who became a yoga teacher. When you watch some of the biggest names in wrestling speak on the microphone, you think it's easy for them. They are professionals who have mastered the art of public speaking. They usually have lines to remember and can even improvise brilliantly if they are really good. But think again. Promos are also risky and can create little moments that we weren't supposed to see. We had an example of this in April 2024 with the wrestler LA Knight. The one who is usually very good had to face an unplanned event that we can't necessarily imagine. He swallowed his chewing gum. As you may know, superstars sometimes take chewing gums to look cool if it fits their character. On that day, while he was in the middle of a passionate rant about WrestleMania, he suddenly couldn't speak anymore for a few milliseconds. You have to realize this is live television, and that he could easily have made a fool of himself in front of millions of people. but we can say that he was able to handle this unplanned thing brilliantly.
By the man they call a megastar!
This shows it is essential for a wrestler to remain confident when something unplanned happens and to manage it calmly whatever the stakes. A quality that we can only admire in these extraordinary individuals. For this number 2, we go back to August 2023 when Becky Lynch was competing against Zoe Stark on Raw. It was not a normal match but a Falls Count Anywhere. That is to say that weapons were legal and that they could go everywhere in the arena. For your information, Stark was allied with the legendary Trish Stratus. It is precisely the latter that will be involved in a little moment that was not supposed to happen.
WE and it's proven effective. Oh, no!
As you can see, she wanted to help her colleague by throwing her a chair to hit Becky, but she botched it a little since she threw it in her face. Fortunately, she did not do it with all her power, which could have injured or knocked out her friend. This incident won't have an impact on the rest of the match, but we can still wonder what would have happened if Zoe Stark had not been able to continue, especially since it was the main event of the show. If there is one type of match where the unexpected can easily happen, it is the Royal Rumble. In this annual 30-man battle royal, the situation is likely to become chaotic if a wrestler is eliminated earlier than expected, or if there is a lack of communication between the wrestlers. One of those moments that weren't supposed to happen concerns Stone Cold Steve Austin, the most popular superstar in the late 90s.
What?
Today we know that he has won these types of matches 3 times in his career, which is a historic achievement. But in 1996, things had gone much worse for the Texas Rattlesnake. It was a time when he was not yet on the rise, so this Royal Rumble represented an ideal opportunity to show his talent. After a few minutes, the opposite happens. He suffers a clothesline from Fatu, who will later become the amazing Rikishi. This causes his elimination, while this is not what was planned at all. In reality, he should have finished 4th in this match, as he revealed several years later. What ruined everything was Fatu's baby oil. Putting this oil on yourself is a very common practice among wrestlers to look better. Because of that, Austin couldn't hang on to the rope as planned, everything slipped and he ended up outside. Fortunately, this incident will not prevent him from becoming one of the greatest of all time.
Oh, hell yeah!
And that was it for those scenes that weren't supposed to happen in the WWE. Seeing all these sometimes unpredictable moments, we realize that a lot of things can happen when you do live television. All these small incidents can only inspire respect for wrestlers because they have this ability to remain calm and react correctly under pressure. If we add that to all the other things they must already be thinking about in a ring, it clearly forces admiration. This makes me propose a debate to you. In your eyes, is the WWE right to continue broadcasting many of its shows live, despite all these risks? We invite you to come and give your opinion. It will be interesting to talk about it together in the comments and to share our points of view. We can say that pro wrestling really is fascinating. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay on the paradise of wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?